Hey, what's up everybody? It's Tim here again from Lowbrow Customs, and we're gonna be doing another install video to get rid of our stock primary and run this 2-inch open belt drive from BDL. So this kit is for a 2-inch open belt. It fits 1990 to 2006 Softails. It's a direct fitment for that drivetrain. It can be used on stock bikes as well as what you see here. We're gonna be running this in a gas box full frame. Big twins are a little tricky, especially new ones where they eliminated the kickstart. So you're kind of stuck with the electric start. So that's one of the downsides about like how big, say, this stock primary is. If you're running a custom bike, it's kind of big, bulky, kind of ugly. So that's something we want to get rid of. And that's the reason we're going to be running a smaller, tidier look to make it even look also like a vintage chopper, but still be able to run the electric start. So this kit includes everything you see here. It has a nice polished inner primary, both the pulleys, belts, the clutch basket comes with steels and fibers, a lot of hardware, cover for the starter shaft. It might look confusing and a lot of stuff sitting here spread out on the table, but I'm going to show you how easy it is to install this on your bike. So the bike behind me is what we're calling Project Stud. It's in a gas box full frame, 3-up, Frisco mounted, big twin 5-speed frame. There's 4-speed frame options available, but as this drivetrain came out of a Softail, we're using their 5-speed option. Before I take this apart, I just wanted to showcase that with this being an aftermarket frame, all the stock stuff is still going to be able to bolt in. We got the stock inner and outer primary on there, and it fits really nicely with the oil tank that Gasbox provides with these frames. That fits an electric start size battery. So you'll be able to fit, like you see the angles right here, nice clearances. You'll be able to fit your starter and everything, all the stock stuff in your custom bike. And I just wanted to show you that before we remove the primary and get to installing the BDL. When you remove your primary, have your service manual handy to just follow the instructions for disassembly. So now we're gonna get rid of this and not bore you with the details because we're gonna get to the meat and potatoes of how to install your BDL. So we got the inner and outer primary off and took everything off that we needed to just to get to just the shafts on the motor and the transmission. And so we're going to work on getting the primary lined up. One of the things that you need to do before we get any further with the inner primary of the BDL is we want to make sure that the motor and trans are both loose and can wiggle on their mount. So we have all the hardware in, but the hardware is loose. Nothing's actually tight. You can actually grab the motor, see how it shakes a little bit, and then you can see the trans. We got play in there also. It doesn't have to be super loose, but you want to be able to move this around so that when you bolt the primary up, the primary lines up the motor and trans, and then there's actually nothing that's going to be restricting the motor or the trans to bolt up flat to the primary, because you don't want tension on the threads to pull them out of the cases of your motor. This BDL inner primary is pretty beefy, but on a stock one, this would be the same process because that one can actually have the potential to crack when you bolt it up if everything isn't sitting super flat. You want to do this process pretty much anytime you're bolting your primary on your bike for the first time. Keep everything loose, even in a stock frame, bolt it up, tighten everything down, and then you can tighten down all the mounts, and that's where it's gonna be. Before we put the primary on, this has an inner race for the stock inner primary because it has roller bearings on the primary. We're going to actually have to remove that because the BDL belt drive, their bearing has the inner race already inside of the primary, and it's just gonna press on to the shafts. You're gonna have to get a special tool. There's a bunch of manufacturers for them. They're very readily available on the internet, and they're specially designed for pulling that inner race off and then pressing it on to the exact same location. And you can find these for relatively cheap. Some is even as cheap as 25 bucks, or if you wanna splurge for a nice Jim's tool, I would also recommend doing that. But you're gonna need one of these if you're gonna wanna run one of these primaries, and I'll show you how to use it. So this puller's made up of a couple pieces. One part has a little step in it, and that's going to grab the outside face of the race to actually be able to draw it off the shaft. And then so you just have to thread in a couple bolts. I suggest trying to get as much on there as possible. At least just full thread engagements till I just barely see the threads popping out the other side. Okay. One thing, the push rod slips through the inside of this shaft. Don't press this tool into the push rod. You want to remove that push rod to press the outside face of the shaft. We have the push rod removed from the inside of the shaft. Here we go. You can smell it. So we got the race removed, and we're going to start installing the inner primary for the BDL. And just make sure that you got your shifter on there. It's going to be really hard to access it. I don't know if you're even going to be able to get this on the shaft, but just make sure that's in place before you put the inner housing on. So that inner race had been on there basically the entire life of this motorcycle. So it might be a good idea just to hit this portion of the shaft with a little red Scotch-Brite just to clean it up. And if there's a lot of like gunk or something on there of just like a little bit of grime getting behind that race or whatever, it'll be a little tricky to slip that bearing over top of it. So might be nice just to hit that a little bit and then maybe just put a touch of grease on there. Just got a little red wheel bearing grease just to make this go together nice and easy. So there's two sets of hardware. There's these clear zinc ones that are significantly shorter than the black oxide. They're the same thread pitch. The black oxide ones, the longer bolts are gonna go for your transmission. You'll notice on the inner primary, it's much more material that has to pass through to get down to the case on the transmission than it is on the motor. So the shorter ones are for the motor, 4 bolts, but then there's 2 extra ones that we're going to use to mount the starter. So I'm gonna get some Loctite on a couple of these just so I can throw some bolts in there real quick just to hold it while after I get it straightened, we wiggle it around and finish bolting it on. So you can see on this inner primary, there's not this tiny little step for the O-ring that you'll notice on a stock inner primary. So I have to remove that from the case. We still have it on there from when we took the stock primary off. And so just get rid of that. We're not going to be using this. And then we're gonna slip the inner in place, start with that other shaft. You're gonna wanna line that portion up first, and this should tap on pretty much real easy. Where did that go? There we go. Just kind of wiggle it into place, and I can put some hardware in. The short zinc ones on the motor. And then the longer black, they're the same thread pitch, those go on the trans. We're just kind of getting them finger tight. Don't want to draw these together with just the hardware. Want to get them as close as you can just by wiggling them back and forth to each other. This should go very easy. If you have to force it, I would stop and double check because you're probably doing something wrong or got something wedged in there. As long as you have everything loose, this is all nicely machined stuff, it should go together very simply. One of the other things, if you're also having these trouble getting these to seat properly, you could have a little bit of burr somewhere on one of these flat mating surfaces that you might have to sand down or dress or something like that. But like I said, this should go together pretty simply. They should just light taps. If you're gonna have to force anything, stop and double check. You might have something wrong. It might even be worth taking your trans out and fitting to your motor by itself to make sure that it can seat flat. Same thing with the trans, just to make sure that they can seat flat to find where your restriction is. I'm just making a mess. So I've got everything finger tight, and I want to just go over this again and get this up to torque specs, which the book says 18 to 22. Definitely refer back to your manual when torquing anything on your bike. But to get it even, I'm going to set my torque wrench a little lower, about 15, and then I'm going to go to 22, just so it torques evenly over the whole range, and I'm not like torquing the front with the back still loose. I'm torquing everything to 15 first, and then I'm going to go back and just up it to 22 just to make sure, just so I'm torquing everything overall evenly and not just tightening down one part of it, like torquing down the front of this super tight while the back is still loose. Okay, now we're up to 22. Now that we got the primary bolted on tight, we can actually bolt down the motor and transmission. For the torque spec out of the book, they call for a 33 to a 38 torque on all the mounting hardware for the motor, and the same as the trans. So let's get the motor and trans torque down. So like I said before, we're torquing this down. It said in the book 33 to 38 foot-pounds. So we're going to install the pulleys on the shaft. When installing the clutch basket, BDL describes slathering the splines with red Loctite. Basically, if you look on their website, they're discussing like dumping almost a full bottle inside the splines. They say to be very liberal. This basket, I just had this on and off once just to check the fitment, and it goes on pretty exactly, but that is their recommendation, and I don't think they would do that for no reason. So you might want to be pretty liberal using some red Loctite on the splines and also some on the threads when installing the clutch basket. They do not mention that for the front motor pulley, but definitely on the clutch. Let's start with the clutch, and that we're not going to do the red Loctite just yet because we're still in the mock-up phase, so this has to come off before it gets ridden. So we're going to do that when we do final assembly, build this bike. But for now, we're just going to fit this up, and we're going to torque everything down correctly, but we're just going to skip over the red Loctite stage. And you can feel its seat. I didn't have to tap that on. It fits on the splines very exact. So you didn't have to beat it on or anything like that. With the red Loctite, I imagine that it's going to go on a lot snugger than it just did. So I'm going to fit the front pulley, and it has multiple pieces. There's this machine piece that actually fits on the splines that the pulley bolts to. And on this shaft has the stock spacer that fits against the stator rotor. And I'm going to try to fit it with the spacer. This part fits pretty tight, and you might have to look in here and actually line up the splines. And once you do that, it should go in. That actually went on pretty easy. Now we have that part on with the spacer. I'm going to fit the belt on and actually put the belt on with the front motor pulley at the same time. Fitting that around. Wait, I want to get the nut on here first, at least just to hold it. And we still need to torque everything, but we're going to finish putting this up before we actually torque these pulleys on. Go. And you can see which holes are supposed to line up. 3 bolts with lock rings, and then also split pins to keep this pulley in line. There's 2 different size holes in the pulley, 3 for the bolts, 3 for the split pins. Don't forget to use Loctite in all these spots. We're not going to be doing so just because this is going to be removed before final assembly. So I'm kind of getting these started so that I need to actually engage this nut on, but I don't want this pulley to be able to rotate on that machine piece and the holes not line up when that gets tight. So I'm just going to get these started and kind of in place, and then we're I'll probably put the split pins in just to get it lined up, and then we're going to actually bolt that on tight. So I'm actually going to leave these split pins out for now because it's going to make it far more difficult to pull this pulley off. Well, to pull it off, and then if it stays one piece, it's going to be hard to get it back on with fighting the tension of the belt and the splines, because this is now going to be basically attached to the other piece. So it's just going to make things more complicated. But I do want to show you an easy way to install these split pins, if you don't have the tool, is to get a really small socket that the split pin basically just fits in. And then, so that'll hold it centered, and you can use that as a driver. So you're not just using a punch on the outside, just face. This actually is going to help locate it centered in the hole and then tap it into place. They make special tools for this. This is not something I do all the time, so I don't have a special punch set for roll pins. But hope that helps. Just a small socket, just enough for the split pin to actually slip inside of, and then you can use an extension just to slightly tap these in, and then afterwards remove that and then just engage the outside face of the split pin to drive it all the way home. Again, we're leaving this out just because we're going to remove this and reinstall this on final assembly, and that's when I'm going to drive these home. So just to thread the front socket on, or front nut on, get this kind of close, and then we're going to tighten up the front motor pulley bolts that hold it to the front. I'm going to tighten these up, and then we're going to torque everything down. Be sure to use Loctite. We're leaving that off just because, like I keep saying, that's a final assembly step, and we're going to remove this a couple times, or at least once, and reinstall for when we're putting this bike together nice. Okay. I'm just going to lightly hit these on, and then we're going to actually have to lock this in place to get a torque on both of these nuts. Remember, this is standard right-hand thread, but the clutch basket on the transmission main shaft is a left-hand thread. So keep that in mind when you're torquing everything down. It's going to be pretty obvious when you're putting everything on, but you need to remember that when you try to remove it, because if you try to remove it the right way, or the standard way, you're just going to be torquing that thing on as hard as possible until you eventually break it. So I pulled the clutches and steels out of the clutch basket, and just removing the pressure plate and getting all of them out in my hand. And as you can see, they're evenly spaced steel fibers. As long as you put the thickest steel in first and then just go with the kit, stacking up one after the other until they're gone, you'll have installed them properly. Like I said, thickest steel first, and then fiber, steel, fiber, steel. So this is pretty standard on any set of clutches. The thickest steel goes in first, and then it's fiber, steel, until they're gone after that. Just alternating one after the other. I'm really good at this. I'm not left-handed. Okay. So we're trying to get this all torqued on. I got the clutch plates installed, and I was kind of working through a couple ways of trying to actually get to be able to torque this nut. So on the book for a stock primary, it says to bend up a rod to put between here so you can actually lock these together to be able to torque it. The problem is with this BDL pressure plate, the center adjustment screw doesn't, it's not like removable like stock. You can take a stock one out with just a circlip and then get to the nut that holds the clutch basket on the main shaft. So the pressure plate for this BDL drive, this is one piece. And so once this is on and we'll be able to actually lock up the clutch basket, you'll no longer have access to the nut holding everything on the main shaft. So we had to figure out a different way to be able to actually torque that while this is independent of the motor. So I put a chain on it to the rear wheel, and we put it in first gear, so that locks the internal hub of the clutch. It's driven on the transmission, but it's locked to the rear wheel. So with the weight on the bike, I think we'll be able to get 70 pounds on it. I'm gonna give it a shot. If I have to put a strap on the rear wheel just to be able to lock that up while I torque it, we might have to do that as well. But the other options would be like they probably have a special clutch locking tool, which is basically like the steel and the fiber as one piece, so it locks the hub together so that it can actually be driven from the motor without the pressure plate being on to lock the steels and fibers together. So I'm gonna give this a shot, try to get it torqued, and then if that works, we'll be able to torque the compensating sprocket nut much easier. We're not using the compensator anymore, but that's the location that it's going to be referring to when you check back to your manual. I got everything in place. I'm gonna try torquing this down. I got my torque wrench out. It says 70 to 80 in the book for the clutch basket, the nut on the main shaft. So run that down. See if that gets me there. I'm gonna go 70 to start. And this is left-hand threads. This is gonna go. So when I was trying to rotate this forward, it was actually sliding the drop down part of the lift out of the way. To get around that, there was holes in the sprocket and I actually just put a strap on it. So as I'm trying to rotate this forward, it will keep the sprocket from being able to rotate forward, which is essentially going to lock up the main shaft. So I'm gonna give that a whirl now. I got this set to 70 foot-pounds. It's almost there. There we go. Okay. So it was a little sketchy, but that works. The other option is, I believe that there's a plate for you to be able to lock these together. So that could also work, but it could be a buddy of yours sitting on the wheel and holding that if you got a real big guy. But the straps seem to work out just fine, and you only really have to do it once. So I don't think that's a big deal. If you don't want to buy the special tool that fits in there, you don't have it, this is also an option that would work, but just having to throw a chain on it. But now that we have this torqued, we'll be able to put the piece of wood in between and then torque the nut that would hold on the compensator compensator sprocket. So BDL has a different kit, so they don't have that actual seal on the main shaft that the push rod would ride in. They have developed a different style of adjuster that has 2 O-rings on it that indicate on the inside of the main shaft, and that's your new seal. So this is gonna go in through the backside, so you're not actually marring up the O-rings when you put this in to the threaded portion of the pressure plate. So make sure that you put that in before you actually stick this on the basket. So fit your push rod in. I put just a little bit of moly lube. I put a little grease on the adjuster just to let that slip into the main shaft a little easier when you go to install it. It can be a little tricky. There we go. And be careful, don't let this pressure plate fall off because there's a bunch of bearings underneath. So since there's 6 bolts on this, it's gonna be kind of tricky. You don't want to remove this pressure plate, especially when this is vertical, because all those ball bearings will fall out that are under this pressure plate. And I don't know, you don't want to juggle too many things, so it might be easier just to start off, get 1 bolt in and started, so you can kind of have a finger on the pressure plate as you tighten this up. Then you can have this being held by that bolt just loosely started, and just one by one thread them in. The heads of the bolts are knurled, so be able to get a little bit of grip on them as you just thread them in by hand. And it'll be easier than trying to juggle all 6 on that pressure plate and try to line them up, and things are loose and you'll be chasing ball bearings off all around your shop. So just one at a time, I think, is the easiest way to do it. So you're just running those in, and since you're holding pressure on the pressure plate, it's easy to keep pressure on the clutches and fibers so they don't fall out of place. And I'm just kind of getting all these even in and tightened by hand. And then I'm going to come in with any kind of tool, and you'll notice, you'll run those in kind of in a star pattern just to keep them even, but you'll notice when it when it stops, because it'll be a very, very positive stop. You can kind of see with the shoulder bolt of when that shoulder bolt hits that face of the hub of the clutch. Yeah, you'll feel, because it can't possibly go anymore. Yeah. So get those nice and tight, going in the star pattern. Ugh. Be sure to use Loctite on all those. And for the center, you're gonna run that in. You'll be able to feel it. And if not, if you go past it, you'll notice, you'll be able to see, if you look from the top, you'll be able to see the difference in the pressure plate. You can see it moving right now. That's me being past the push rod. So I'm actually, with the adjuster screw, pushing the diaphragm spring and collapsing that, so it's relieving pressure off the clutches. I'm doing that with the adjustment screw. So if you're not sure if you're hitting that push rod or not, that's a telltale way you'll see this start to move. So run that in until you'll just notice it get a little bit tougher. You'll feel that tension, and then you're gonna back it off. BDL says a half a turn. There's my stop, so a half a turn. And we're gonna lock that down. And then we're gonna take the adjustment out of the clutch lever. And that's just like anything else. You kind of just run that end play out till you got about an eighth of free play at the lever. And with the lever in, you can see these spread apart. And what BDL says for the, you pull these apart, you can see this moving. You pull these apart and you should be able to turn this by hand. We got this in gear still. There, we're in neutral, so pulled it in, it's locked up, and then by hand you can turn it. So that's neutral. And they say if you can't do this, you need to start over with your clutch adjustment, or maybe you have an issue with the fibers or steels not being, maybe they fell off the splines or something like that. But if you can't do this, you got something wrong and you need to start over, and your bike will never get into like pulling in the clutch and your clutch is being disengaged. So now that we got this locked down, we're gonna be able to actually tighten up the front motor pulley by locking these pulleys together. So in the Harley manual, you can use a bent rod, or it'll show you a little diagram of locking the teeth together so that they can't rotate, so you can actually tighten this up. But since these pulleys, they're made out of aluminum, they're different, the teeth are different. We're not gonna put any kind of metal in there so we can torque it. We're gonna use a piece of wood, which is just a simple cut. It doesn't even have to be that critical of a dimension. I just roughly cut this down, but I had to notch this to get it around the flange. And I could give you a measurement. To get you close, it's about 8 3/8. It's 5/8 thick. And I just had to make just a quick little rough notch to get around that flange. And you'll see that you'll be able to just kind of drop this into place. There we go. And that is going that way, so I'll actually have to move it to the other side. So I'm torquing this front one to 150. The book says 150, 165. There we go, and you can see I kind of just had to lightly hold the wood in place and to get that thing to lock up. But I also have it in gear. I also have the chain. And so all those things working with each other will have, this thing's pretty locked down, so it should be easy to, you could use any number of these methods to get your pulleys torqued down to the right spec. So we still got to fit the starter to the back of the inner primary, but there's a couple things that you're going to have to do first. This is basically how we pulled the starter out of the stock inner primary, and BDL gives you a couple different pieces that work with their belt drive setup, how they modified it to work. But so we have to get rid of a couple things off our starter, so we won't be using that. This sleeve with the spline, with the internal splines, was kind of stuck on the shaft and I couldn't get it off, and just trying to pull this off would actually pull the Bendix out. And so it was stuck on there pretty good. And if you run into that issue, I just had a pair of vice grips that I had a slide hammer on the back side of it where the adjuster screw is. You can buy them, they're pretty common, but I just grabbed onto this sleeve to pop it off. It just needed a little bit of force, but it came right off. Just a little tip, if you have that, you'll be able to get it off too. So I'm gonna show you the stack up from BDL. It's really simple and they have a nice exploded view. So this should be the same as far as any starter 1990, 2006. The only difference being that it comes with two different Allen head bolts. One's 1032, one's 1/4-20, and clearly whichever one fits on the shaft coming out of your starter will be the bolt that you use. But everything else as far as the stack up goes will be the same. First thing, there's a splined washer, and that's just gonna fit onto the shaft. Then we got a spring. Then we have the pinion gear. They're calling this the pinion gear sleeve tube. And then there's a top hat, and that slips in on top. I already know that the shaft on the starter is 1/4-20, so that's the bolt I'm going to be using. And that just slips in on top, and you just got to tighten this up and hold the gear as you tighten it up. Really simple, couldn't really be easier. And that's good. And then, so now we're going to install this on the back of the inner primary. So we're gonna have to switch sides to get over there. So you see 3 holes, 2 for bolts, 1 for a dowel, and we'll have the corresponding dowel pin on that side. And so it goes pretty easy. Be sure to use some Loctite in this area, and the torque spec would be the same as the other locations. It's 5/16 18, so I would say about 18 to 22 would be what I would recommend for that. I'm starting with the bolt on the opposite side of the dowel pin, and that should hold it up and keep it located while I get the other side in. So easy as can be installing the starter on this end. Now we have to switch to the other side of the bike and fit the cap. It says BDL on the side, but it also has a bushing for the pinion gear for the starter. Very important piece, but it looks like just some nice little trim. So we're gonna switch over and do that now. Okay, so now you can see what I'm talking about, and we got a bushing corresponding to the pinion gear on the starter. So when that shoots out, it's going to shoot out more into this little trim piece, and this is actually going to support it as it's starting your bike. So we're going to just make sure that slips in nice, and as you're tightening this up, there's a little bit of play. We're just going to make sure that it's flush everywhere on the edges of the inner primary as we snug this up. Again, don't forget to use some Loctite, and we're going to torque these down from 18 to 22 foot-pounds. Remember to keep these flush with the edges. Just make this line up nice as you're tightening this up. So we still have a few things to do. This is still in a mock-up stage. We need a battery, it needs wired, all that. But if you were gonna put this on your bike, a few things before you were ready to go for a ride. BDL does recommend putting some red Loctite on your main shaft, and you're gonna wanna let that dry up before you actually take that for a ride, because it could make a mess, get on your clutch plates, etc. So just give that a little bit of time to dry up before you take this for a ride. So that's a wrap. I hope you found this video helpful and informative, especially when you go to put one of these BDL belt drives on your motorcycle. You'll be able to find this one right here or a few more like it at lowbrowcustoms.com, as well as many, many other parts. So until next time, I'm Tim, and thanks for watching.